Next up, we have Daniel Gins, who is the UK Media Sales Director of Taboola. And Daniel is going to be talking about how respectful advertisers capture attention and win business. Welcome, Daniel.
It's Gins. Thanks, Paul. I shall jump straight in. So exactly that, how respectful advertisers capture attention and win business. Now, if you're anything like me, over the last year, you've been spending a lot of time in front of screens consuming content online. In fact, a recent study showed that the average amount of time that people spent consuming content online actually doubled in 2020. This is, of course, on one hand, great news for advertisers. That means that for the first time in decades, we've been able to reach our target audience, know exactly where they are at any given moment. They've been behind their screens. But on the other hand, this increase in time spent online has been coupled with rises in anxiety, in depression, and loneliness. So yes, there's a captive audience at the advertiser's disposal, but it's possibly, at the moment, a vulnerable and a struggling one. The question is, how should brands respond to this? How should they change their marketing strategy to seize the opportunity to both reach consumers while also being respectful of them and not taking advantage? So I'm going to offer 3 tips how to do this successfully. Tip number 1, read the room. As marketers, we need to get much better at this. We need to understand exactly where people are and how they're feeling. I'll illustrate this with one example. Say you're in a busy train station. I know that's a bit of a stretch at the moment, something that maybe many of us don't want to be going back to, but bear with me. You're waiting in a queue, you're buying a ticket at the ticket machine, you're entering your destination and you start looking at all the options. Imagine at that moment a vendor comes up to you and offers to start selling you a sandwich. Now you might be starving hungry, but are you going to stop in the middle of your transaction when you're selecting a train to pick out a sandwich? Chances are you'd have been much more likely to engage with that vendor while you were waiting, A, in the queue, or had you walked away from your queue and you were going to do something else, you'd be more receptive. This is true online as well. In 2018, the IAB ran a study with Lumin, which found that attention was more than twice as high on content sites than on task sites like National Rail or like Rightmove, suggesting that when people are on a mission, it's probably not the right time to be speaking to them. The second tip is to be trustworthy. Now, obviously, this applies to your message, but it also applies to your placement. If your really great ad appears alongside fake news or low-quality content, chances are that this is going to hurt your consumers' opinion of your brand. Alternatively, placing your brand in a premium content environment can boost trust in your brand and in the content of your ad. We ran a study in 2020 that found that when people are asked whether they would trust an ad in a premium news site or on a social media site, more than 80% of the people felt that ads on news sites were more trustworthy. Not only that, but if we circle back to the IAB study, it was found that attention was higher on sites with premium content. The IAB named appearing in a premium content environment as the single biggest driver of ad attention. And finally, be native. The fact is, consumers don't like ads that disrupt and annoy them, and that's never been more true than during the pandemic, as we've seen. In a study by Kantar, consumers were asked what the rules of advertising should be during the coronavirus pandemic period. The survey revealed that overwhelmingly consumers want advertising to be helpful, informative, but without exploiting the situation at hand. So in this environment, pop-ups and disruptive, unskippable ads are probably not the right medium to get in front of your audience and to get your message across. I want to leave you with one example of one of our advertisers, which is Naked Wines, who used our platform to target consumers during the pandemic period. If you're not familiar with Naked Wines, they're a bulk wine delivery service. And over the past year, they ran a series of ads like the one you see above, with headlines like, "Why you should stop drinking £5 supermarket wine." Now, when you click on this ad, it leads you to a quiz-style landing page that gently leads the consumer down the funnel in an engaging, informative, and interactive way. So the 3 steps again to reiterate. Read the room, understand your audience, where they are, what they're doing, how they're feeling at any given time, and talk to that. Secondly, be trustworthy. Think about where you're placing your ad and where people are going to be most receptive to the message that you want to deliver to them. And finally, be native. Place your ad in an environment where they feel comfortable, where context is key, and where they're interested in the message you're trying to get across. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. Great presentation. So context has always been important, I guess, in media, but maybe has been lost a little bit in the world of kind of programmatic. How do you, with your customers, your brands, agencies, how do you encourage them to actually really deeply think about context when it comes to creative? Because often that's like an afterthought rather than at the front of the conversation.
Yeah, good question, Paul. I think from our perspective, being in holistically a native environment, we're trying to encourage storytelling, in that people want to be spoken to in the moment where they're most receptive to a particular message, but tell them a story that's very much related to your brand, that resonates with them in the right place, in the right time. So it looks and feels like they're engaging in content, they're enjoying that content for the right reasons, rather than throwing something at the wall and, the old way of hoping it sticks and hoping you can generate some kind of response that way. I think attention's not always good. And we talk about the attention economy now and how important that is, but
right.
There can be something as bad attention. So we try to encourage good attention, engagement, interaction, and awareness for advertisers in a premium news and publisher environment.
Got it. Yeah, and I like your reminder about those moments. Like that's when we're going to find audiences that are most engaged. What you touched on, the fact that during the pandemic, there's been research showing that people want brands to actually engage in things that are helpful, useful, and not obviously either patronising or kind of damaging. Like, what's your school report on how brands are doing on that? Because I'm sure we all see some horror stories still out there.
I'm going to show a good example. It's about giving. It's about providing something back now, I think, to the consumer, rather than necessarily taking. So the ones that get the message across, they're giving, they're informing, they're entertaining, rather than necessarily just splashing an ad to you. They're the good examples, Paul, that we've seen, and I showed one there.
Yeah, great. Well, look, thank you, Dan. Really appreciate it. Thank you for joining us. I think it's this afternoon, just about.